Those who seek to change our societies for the better know that there can be a frustrating puzzle. We know what causes the crisis, we know what needs to be done to fix it, those in power know what needs to be done to fix it, and yet nothing is happening. Politics is going round and round in circles, society as a whole stands still. Left unattended, the crisis gets worse. The reason why we cannot move forward as a society lies in the very way how we approach the process of change. Most of the time, our politics are purely transactional. One side wins what the other side loses. But this zero-sum game leaves a system which produces the crisis untouched. In order to fix the great crisis of our time, from climate change to jobless growth, from mass migration to social inequality, we need to change the very system that produces them. In other words, we need to master the art of transformative politics. The starting point is to acknowledge that change always produces winners and losers. This means change is the outcome of the struggle between those who seek to uphold the status quo and those who want to travel a new path. This means our ability to make change is a direct consequence of our ability to win this struggle. And as many actors and groups believe to benefit from the status quo, those who resist change are a formidable force to reckon with. No social actor or single group has the power to win this struggle on their own. Only a broad societal alliance can mobilize enough power resources to break through the resistance of the status quo coalition. This is why transformative change-making is all about alliance building. But alliance building is a tricky thing. People tend to have differing and sometimes opposing interests and identities, values and worldviews. Sometimes they can agree that they fight against the same thing, but it is very rare that they can agree on something they all struggle for. Currently, there are three failing approaches to alliance building. The first approach mobilizes the most faithful believers in change with pure and authentic messages. The resulting intersectional alliances are narrow and therefore too weak to win the struggle against the forces of the status quo. The second approach agrees to agree on nothing. The resulting multitudes are unwilling to organize and therefore unable to push through any agenda. The third approach agrees on the lowest common denominator between interest groups. The resulting catch-all alliances are firmly rooted in the status quo and are therefore unable to transform the system. In order to build broad societal alliances, transformative change-making invites social groups beyond the already convinced, but only those who are at least potentially open to change. Instead of a smorgasbord of policies to attract different interest groups, transformative change-making builds alliances around narratives and catalytic projects. Here is how it works. Let's start with the change narrative. It is often said that rational individuals follow their objective interests. But in reality, people are not isolated individuals, but members of many communities. They talk to their families, friends and neighbors, get their information from all kinds of media, and are influenced by political parties, religious groups, or professional associations. Here they gather what is happening and what needs to be done. And what is happening and what needs to be done is the essence of a narrative. These narratives can be stable over decades, but they can be shifted. The best way of shifting narratives is to introduce an alternative vision of the future. If expectations how the future will unfold are shifting, people reassess the situation they are in right now. A new assessment about the situation right now leads to a new calculation of risks versus opportunities. A new calculation of risks versus opportunities results in the redefinition of interests. So people who believe to have different interests today can come to the conclusion that they may have the same interests in an alternative future scenario. An alternative narrative about the future is therefore an effective means of alliance building. This is hardly new insight. Religions and progressive movements have for centuries used utopian visions for a better future in order to mobilize people to change the here and now. However, this narrative is not arbitrary. The change narrative is the platform onto which a broad alliance of societal groups can come together to join a common struggle for change. This means the narrative must be compatible to as many discourse communities as possible. Transformative change-making uses the political field analysis as a tool to construct the most suitable narrative for the transformative alliance. This is how it works. Any political field is made up by the interaction of social groups struggling over the question which principles and rules should organize the field. If you want to make change in any field, let's say education policy or security policy or climate policy, you first have to understand the lay of the land. This can be done in 4 steps. First, identify the main conflict lines or cleavages that organize the field. Could be market versus state distribution, or could be open versus closed culture, or GDP growth versus zero emissions, or something else. If you take the 2 most important ones, you have a coordinate system for the political field. Second, map all the discourses you can think of into that coordinate system. Don't worry if a discourse is less widely acknowledged than others, just map it. The more detailed the discourse landscape gets, the better. Remember, a narrative always should describe what the problem allegedly is, what is happening, and what the cure to that problem is supposed to be, what needs to be done. The purpose of this step is to better our understanding of the different worldviews guiding actors. So take your time to properly discuss the position of the identified discourses in the field, because this exercise really helps everyone in the room to get on the same page. Third, map all the relevant social actors into the field. Again, the more detailed, the better. So not just the government, but which ministry or agency. Not just business, but which company or association. Not just labor, but which union, and so on. Try to map the actors over the discourses they promote. This will sometimes come as a surprise because social actors can have different positions in different fields. You may be surprised that actors you may consider opponents can have relatively similar views to your own in one particular field. The purpose of this exercise is, of course, to identify potential allies. Finally, not all discourses are equally important, and most certainly not all actors are equally powerful. Some of the most powerful actors never speak in public at all. Think of feudal landowners, mighty bureaucrats, military leaders, or financial elites who pull the strings in the shadows. To take these differences in power into account, we locate the center of political gravity. Forget all the nice rhetoric of lofty speeches and ask yourself, what is only talk and where is the action? Is a treaty signed or not? Is a law passed or not? Is a budget allocated or not? Is force being used or not? What direction does the country travel to in this moment? The center of political gravity can sometimes be identical with the government, but in other cases it is not. Imagine the political field as a force field where many different forces struggle over the overall direction. Sometimes the center of gravity is with one group of actors, sometimes it moves to another group of actors. Again, this is a lesson in the importance of alliances. If actors join forces in a powerful alliance, they can move the center of political gravity and start to implement change. Please have a sober look where you and your peers are located on this political field. Are you close to the center of political gravity or far away? How many allies do you have? This will decide if your political goals can be accomplished or if you will hit a wall. Now that we have a good overview of the balance of forces, the strategy debate can begin. Who could be our allies in our quest to make change? On which platform could they come together? And what could be a bridge too far? Map the change alliance platform in the field. Take your time, discuss it thoroughly. This is the most important part of the exercise. In fact, as the political field is highly dynamic and always moving, it makes sense to repeat this exercise every now and then. There's no better way for a group to develop and agree on a common strategy. Now that we have located the position of the narrative in the political field, it just needs to be formulated. Of course, what is happening and what needs to be done is the essence of the narrative. In order to make it as convincing as possible, it needs a bit more flesh on these bones. A good narrative should evoke 5 elements. Threat. How bad things can get if we don't act. Hope. What better world is possible if we act. Opportunity. What structural trends will help us to transform the situation. Confidence. We've done it before, so we can do it again. Values. This is why this is the right thing to do. Play around with these elements and try to formulate 5 short sentences that make your point as intellectually, normatively, and emotionally convincing as possible. Together, they form your strategic narrative or your platform around which a transformative alliance can come together. A narrative is important, but words must be translated into action. This is where the catalytic projects come in. Catalytic projects are concrete interventions that can in time transform the situation for the better. Again, not any project will do. Catalytic projects need to match certain criteria. In order to be transformative, the projects need to unleash or reinforce structural trends that can transform the situation. For example, the pattern of energy consumption, or the level of education, or the number of good livelihoods. To achieve that, the project needs to scale. Pilot projects are good, but if they do not reach the lives of millions, they're just not good enough. To get the project off the ground, there needs to be a coalition of early supporters that can make it work. If they succeed, the success story can convince others that change is in fact possible and inspire them to get into the change game themselves. And of course, the project needs to exemplify the narrative. So make it a concrete and touchable example of what this promised change will look like. Here's how to identify and properly design catalytic projects. First, start with a brainstorming. What kind of project can you think of that could exemplify the change you want to see? Second, do a proper reality check. What kind of ingredients do you need to make this project happen? From funding and legal permissions, all the way to tech support and maintenance. Third, who will provide these ingredients? Be as concrete as you can. What agency needs to give the permission? Who can build the hardware? Who has the necessary expertise? What community do you win over? Finally, can you design the incentives of the project in a way to win over those who are now sitting on the fence? Can you make the bottom line more attractive for the businessman? Will it help a politician to win voters? What makes it more attractive for the media? What keeps volunteers or staff motivated? Now that you have a compelling narrative to win the discourse battle and doable projects to exemplify the change on the ground, go out and do it. But you may ask yourself, who is supposed to do all this work? Construct the narrative, design the projects, implement the change. Here, a seed community can be very helpful. A seed community brings together 10 to 20 stakeholders active in the political field you wish to transform. You know the mix of representatives from government and business, the bureaucracy, labor unions, NGOs, academia or think tanks from traditional multi-stakeholder dialogues. The difference is that participants are invited as individuals, not as representatives of any institution. And it is better to only invite individuals who are at least potential allies for transformative change. So the seed community will construct the narrative and design the project. The coalition of early supporters will implement the project, and your transformative alliance can change the society as a whole.